Good evening, ladies and gents. This is Deners the Human, and welcome to the Artillery Only Challenge. This is the second part of our quickfire romp through Medieval 2. So if you missed part 1, then it's popping up at the top now. But today we're going to get into the cannons. So with no further ado, let's get into the action. Here is our splendid leader, Henry the Cuckold, whose wife is hilariously deemed as admirable. He looks to recapture our very first conquest, the city of Rennes. And perhaps in response to his title, he brings massive and explosive weaponry to the field, having revolutionised the Norman artillery roster, and we will indeed see that in brutal action here today. Elsewhere, we are recapturing our homeland of Caen, as well as Bordeaux down to the south, to ensure that our Iberian holdings link up to the homelands from now on. We obviously have Toulouse already, but we have sent our triple silver chevron general, the well-respected Edward the Fat, who continues the tradition of belittling our greatest heroes. William the Conqueror, you may recall, was axed to death for his hubristic title, never even stepping foot in England. Edward, though, is off on crusade to Genoa with his old school force. Fear not, though, we'll grab Marseille on the way. Speaking of taking back our former holdings, it's time to move into our old capital, the citadel of Caen. To do this, of course, we need to wage war on France and take down the French prince, Henry the Honest, who, as you can guess, has himself the liar trait. Why would he not? But impressive as he looks, his support army isn't. Clearly it was an attempt to fight fire with fire. The French are just truly Norman wannabes. Classic anti-France speech to start us off today then, and you might well notice that I didn't bother to fix many of the skins on this occasion, so many of our units will remain as Silver Surfers, although I kind of like it that way anyway. And since we love irony today, we even deliver a speech about their foul use of cannons. Absolutely ridiculous. Steve, get out of the way! Ridiculous, lad. Anyway, better get on with this artillery duel. The Mongol rocket launchers are spectacularly good fun, and I'm very glad I picked them over the Rebolts. They're just that much more effective. I was just a little bit worried about lucky pot shots from the artillery in the back, but to be honest, we very quickly set those lads ablaze too. Victory would be ours soon enough. Whilst taking the citadel itself saw us take heavy losses due to the general's heavy cav, it was our General Hugh Despencer himself who wound up delivering the winning blast. Soon enough, Henry the Cuckold would update the general unit to something more befitting, but for now, the only thing to do is listen to the French squirm, and with that, our homelands were back under control. Continuing the great tradition of irony, we accuse our opponents of employing a woman's stratagem or throwing things at us. Oh, our general's raillery is hilarious. Though in some ways, this was an apt point, as taking on a force of Genoese crossbowmen was a good test of our prowess. Such troops are among the most awkward for us and obviously one of the most brutal in the game, but we would eventually prevail on the battlefield, and a battlefield that pleasingly had a lovely little fortification to fight over. A high candidate for most epic encounter throughout the campaign was the Battle of Corubga in modern-day Morocco. Our experienced but old-fashioned forces were led by our fearless, well-blooded leader, a veteran of the Iberian campaigns, Duke Harold himself. He would take on our spiritual brothers, the Moors. Now, the Moors have always loved an artillery army in this game, and thus the inevitable was soon to occur. An almost entirely artillery-only clash. Instantly, their trebuchets landed lucky hits on our more shortly ranged heroes. This could have been a crippling blow, but soon we were in a pitched campaign of blazing bombardment, a truly beautiful sight for the peoples of our shared culture. Howard himself, though, somehow managed to dodge some blistering shots from the Moors, but his heroic tale was yet to be told. Still, the Moors didn't play fair and fielded some actual infantry. I mean, what the hell, guys? You're supposed to be my brethren here. But these troops would in the end cause us some significant problems, allowing our perfidious foe the artillery advantage. And with some spectacular glitching ritual, Harold was able to closely defy death once more, but with his catapult, the Great Spoon of Destiny now destroyed, it was time for some hand-to-hand combat. Morale advantages meant that our troops fought until the very last man, and this was a truly special encounter, one of those where both sides fought until only a handful of troops remained on both sides. Sadly, some of the routing troops would continue to re-enter the fray, and we just did not have enough to hold in the end. Harold saw that it was time to withdraw. He had been defeated, and with such a splendid display of honour, we would never again make the mistake of challenging our artillery-loving friends, the wondrous Moors. Back in Europe, the French were soon soundly defeated, and our leaders could focus on upgrading the general's bodyguard into something more appropriate for the modern age. Yes, we would now be fighting with Culverin. Meanwhile, over with Edward the Fat, our newly attained alliance with the Pope allowed us to join the siege of Genoa with some spectacularly well-experienced troops. Also, though, with an added special weapon, the Grand Bombard. Kablamo! Oh, that's what we all have come to see. Yes, things would certainly get a bit easier with the Grand Bombard, and indeed, sieges will become fresh once again, with an increasing variety of new toys to bring to the fore. With the Pope on side and Milan still excommunicated, we pushed on with removing this menace. A new stack of cannon-based armies had been assembled, ready to fulminate around Milan. Duke Henry had gone further down his apparently ironic title, gaining full authority in spite of all of his negative authority traits. Oh, it's a marvellous little bug. Oh, it is cute when the game brings up the advisor when you have it explicitly turned off. If he thinks I'm here to level the city, he is of course absolutely correct. Having said that, it did seem awfully like the game was determined to glitch out and not allow the walls to collapse. Fear not though, the engine would eventually catch up and the walls would crumble. In part they would in the end collapse because my allies were shattering the defences from all around. This did expose a little problem though, that the AI actually refuses to enter the city with only artillery units, so the final job would be down to me and me alone. Luckily, our new Serpentines were excellent anti-infantry cannons, being able to accurately clip the chins of several lines of men through only a small breach. This battle was beautiful chaos, and soon they gave up their not-so-wally defences. Meanwhile, the rocket launchers were playing havoc in their long streets, with their generals gradually going down to us. Our range was now truly catastrophic for the defenders, with our Serpentines being able to shoot the plaza from outside the city walls. Any charges they did make were soon routed. My allies did prove useful eventually though, with the main general being shot down outside the city walls. A little bit strange, but I'll take it. The final few kills are always a little awkward though, and we did lose a couple of generals when we were ambushed on the plaza. Still, the Milanese were soon too wise to inveigh against the inevitability of our victory and kindly ceased to live. With the city sacked, the Pope showed more forgiveness to Milan than I ever have and decided to reconcile the Milanese, just in time for them to cease to exist at all. Absolute bliss. So with Portugal and Milan now defeated, the axis of evil had been reduced to only Sicily. Of course, they would need purging too. A few years on and the inevitable imperial backstab has led us to taking Bern, Staufen and Metz as we plotted our next move. World conquest was too big an ambition, but aside from Rome and the Sicilians, and eventually the New World of course, there would have to be some other options. Before all that though, I should probably introduce you to our new king or duke or whatever the hell we call it these days, as Harold and Henry have both sadly passed in the intervening years. Say hello to Ambrose the Mad. He did happily get the chivalrous father trait from his father's legacy, but he's not quite the shining example of leadership I was hoping for. Harold the Malevolent actually passed of the plague sadly, although Henry did die a peaceful death, so at least that one's a slightly happier ending. Employing bridge trolls on the Rhine border would soon become a priority, but oh, are these bridge battles fun. As you can imagine, a tightly amassed army is a perfect bit of target practice for our heartless goons. The Danes will continue to fruitlessly send armies to the bridge, many meeting a similar fate. But after they met the ultimate bridge troll, Perkin, they would give up on their western conquests, but more on Perkin a little bit later. With the Pope on side, it was time to head on a crusade towards Constantinople, or should I say Tomstantinople, as it soon will be called. It will be conquered by none other than Anselm of Bedford himself, a man from my very own hometown, a fitting tribute, methinks. En route, the Venetians decided that now was the time to start a war whilst I was on crusade, A messy start to the crusade for sure, and a bit of an awkward battle with reinforcements coming from the flank, but once again, with the hill advantage and the morale penalties of all my artillery, the Venetians bit off far more than they could chew. Back on the campaign map, and the Mongolians seemed to be sending me a message. I wasn't quite sure what it was. Perhaps it's something to do with my single Mongolian rocket launcher defending the city. I couldn't see any armies, but something told me that it was time to reinforce. Elsewhere, an empty Zagreb was easy pickings, so I nabbed that on my way eastward towards the Egyptian-held city of Constantinople. When it was time to head in, victory seemed all but certain with our 3 armies ready to go. They didn't really have a lot left in the city, to be honest. Our Serpentines, though, would soon highlight their continued excellence, nailing the Sultan from outside the city's own walls. After the Horse Gate scandal, the Egyptians soon realised that whatever their tactics, we would gun them down eventually. With the city a smoke and ruin, there was even a moment of light relief for the townsfolk. In all my years of playing, I've never noticed a maniacally happy face that pops out of a building after shelling it. How eerily amusing. The latest Saracen tactic of turning their backs to enemy missiles was equally ineffective, and soon victory was ours. Constantinople was in Norman hands. Of course, the Sicilians needed to be evicted from Rome, so delightfully a new bridge battle would come into play. The Battle of the Milvian Bridge would crush the Sicilian resistance for good. The misery of the sloshing rain somehow added an artistic spectacle to the whole affair, but clearly peasants wouldn't stop us now. The crossbowmen, though, did nearly make contact with us, but just failed to reach us before breaking, as so often is the way with this particular tactic. So with that done, mopping up the enemy was always going to be slow and messy, but we did very pleasantly see nice evidence of the local university on the battle map. What a lovely little feature. With the Stockholm Syndrome really kicking in, we gave in to the Pope's request for Rome. Apparently, he would now regard us as a close ally, but I couldn't help but notice that our relations were merely reasonable. A strange old lady, that Pope. To secure her affections, after mysteriously becoming neutral, we would pass over more of our eastern conquests. As befitting for this toxic relationship, these gifts simply left our relationship now as abysmal. Perplexing. With Europe mostly under control, it was time to head west, and who better than Hugh the Honest, the man who retook our old capital of Cannes. In fact, his whole family was simply wondrous. His young nephew Morcar was a born conqueror in his early 20s, having helped his father, Perkin the Brave, defend the Rhinelands from Danish aggression. Brother Paul was an accomplished veteran of the Imperial Wars, and together they would all head west to conquer the Americas. Of course, we'd have to hire ourselves some elephant artillery. How could we not? Unfortunately, this is where my excessive modding for various videos at once has caught up with me. Constant crashes were rendering the end turns unplayable, the log of errors was spectacular, and so I chose to reinstall the game. Even so, the end turns were a struggle, so with the game nearly over, I had to resort to console controls to teleport the armies to their battle locations. Luckily for me, the war was fully prepared, and that did mean that in spite of a frustrating delay to the campaign, victory was soon close at hand.
As you command, my liege.
Before taking Tenochtitlan, there was of course the end of the Axis of Evil to take care of. Sicily still remained, and Tunis was empty, so that was simple to take care of. It was then down to Tripoli. They would even field Norman knights. Their hubris must be punished. The usual tactics were effective as ever, with both generals being slaughtered by rockets, before we saw that most glorious of messages, Sicily's demise. And that just left Tenochtitlan. The Pope had received the newly conquered territories of the Old World, but the Aztec armies would pose interesting new tactics. Mysteriously, they all stormed out of the gate for a hail of artillery fire, and when I say all of them, I mean, most of them actually got splattered at the gateway, to be honest with you. It was kind of a catastrophic decision, which very much worked in my favour. We did, of course, have the elephants to have a bit of fun with those who actually did make it to our lines, but soon we were back to the old classic serpentine target practice. Perkin the Brave eventually even stepped up to the front line, still wielding the old style of catapult, and yet he managed to push back the charge of the enemy warriors. Indeed, it was Perkin the Brave himself who could be found at the very front as the last Aztec warrior fell on the plaza, and with that, victory was ours. Suffice to say that Perkin took some pretty big scalps in this final battle, although not As many as the elephants, it should be said. I will forever love the utter chaos of our elephant friends. Sadly, young Morcar did not make it through the battle, but I suppose there must be tragedy with every glory. But if you ever were in doubt of artillery's effectiveness, then bring it up with Perkin, because I think we've shown that you can quite clearly hold your own with only artillery. To be honest, the main problem has been public order, and thus my finances. Still, I would say, in terms of the units, the Mongol rocket launcher, I mean, that is obscene, staggeringly OP. Probably not really meant to be used very much, but in terms of the more regular artillery pieces, I mean, the Serpentine, the Culver and the Basilisk are definitely underutilised by me, and I think in general, to be honest, they're exceptional units. I definitely want to make more use of those in future. But I suppose it's probably a good place to leave it then. Thank you for joining me on this epic romp through Medieval 2 and the Artillery Only Challenge. Let me know if you have any challenge suggestions for me in the comments. Of course, my guide for gunpowder units in general and for making the Normans playable are both in the description below. Enjoy the debut end card today, and finally, there will be a new series starting next Monday, so do please join me for that. Thank you for watching, and bye-bye. Welcome to Babylon, which is empty. Oh, Steve's dead. Bit of a shit. They seem a bit sad about it all. It's okay, guys, this is what it's about. Oh, they turned their backs! We did actually break them with a charge. Exceptional. Look, we can... How are we doing this? They may take our armies, but they'll never take our spies.